I had been in Austin for a few days visiting friends who reside in Louisiana, so my final trip was essentially a full-day journey. My longtime friend Tom had a day in Austin. Asked in a comment on my Instagram story, he told me today when I was leaving. He resided 1 hour away from Austin, which was truly headed toward home, for it had been years since I last saw Tom. He replied it would be to catch up, or to drop by, and I replied, sure, why don't I? When I set my GPS to Tom's address, it displayed roughly 1.5 hours by car. Tom and I remained friends from high school, but lost contact during graduation. We followed social media friends, but hadn't. When I pulled up, I had not talked in years. I observed that his home was a little vintage. It wasn't dilapidated or anything that simply ages. The wooden porch crackled beneath my feet, and as I opened the door, I smelled the aroma of aged wood and a rustic-looking item, such as an antique cabin in the forest. Naturally, Tom was very friendly, giving me a strong embrace and drawing me in. Some companionship persisted. Equally pure, regardless of the amount of time passes, the house's interior was merely as ancient as the furniture's exterior appeared to have existed since 1970s, and each action I took on the hardwood floors led out to a tiny creak that it felt Texan. It was kind, I suppose, charming in a manner similar to taking a step back. We eventually took a seat in his living room, drinking whiskey while catching up on life. By this time it was approximately 5 p.m. The drink became 2, 3, and I was somewhat inebriated before I realized it. The alcohol's warmth created a feeling of busier hours, but a smaller, cozier went by like minutes. To be honest, we were enjoying catching up so much that he finally abandoned the question. I knew that he would say, "Hey man, you got along. Why don't you crash here on the way back?" The evening he provided, I was hesitant, but he was correct. I was in no condition to be on the road. I asked, "Yeah, good idea," if I were to take the couch that we were using, and then he replied, "No, I have a spare room. It's not fancy, yet it's superior to the we ate on a couch that was adequate for me." A few Chinese dishes that we brought over, and eventually he guided me down a brief, the corridor leading to the spare bedroom. Since we were both inebriated, I didn't really see the interior of the room. However, I recall that the atmosphere in the room was as if the space hadn't been utilized in a long period. I hardly had time to observe my surroundings before I fell fully onto the bed. Worn out and intoxicated at some point when I woke up that night, my head and mouth were dry, was whirling, and it was black in the room. Aside from a small amount of moonlight entering covertly through the blinds, which, as I noticed, hit in the distant corner of there was a space on the closet door. At first glance, it appeared that something was dangling, similar to a long black trench coat rack, but when I changed the shape with my eyes, it had a broad upper, and it felt incorrect. Section that resembles shoulders, and the way it hung gave the impression that cloth and more akin to a silhouette. My heart was thumping in my chest. I recall seeing that when I tripped into the bed, but perhaps I had been intoxicated. I simply hadn't realized that I had rolled over. Attempting to disregard it, it was merely a coat, nothing more, yet I was powerless to stop myself. I peeked once more, remained there, and squeezed my eyes closed, inhaled deeply, and compelled. I'm going to bed. I have no idea how long I was outside before I awoke once more. It was more than just discomfort that drew me in. It was a slow, gentle murmur coming from sleep. Creaking like if someone were taking cautious steps, my eyes sprung open on an ancient hardwood floor. It was now dark in the room. Dawn creeping, I glanced through the blinds, near the corner, and I felt sick to my stomach. The coat was gone. I sat up quickly enough that my brain whirled. My entire body hummed with the nauseating combination of leftover and fear alcoholic beverages. I looked at my heart. Nothing was thudding against my ribcage. There is only an empty closet door in the corner. I flung off the covers and hurried to Tom was snoring loudly in his room. I was not conscious of the panic that was rushing through me. It requires great effort to shake him awake. Effort given that he was absent from all after drinking. He eventually woke up rather bewildered. I rubbed his eyes with the coat. The person in the coat spoke breathlessly. He peered at me from the spare room rack. Unsure of the coat he was referring to, the trench coat that was dangling, it appeared. To be a human on the closet door. Tom nearly sat up, appearing more alert now. Man, I don't have a trench coat. I don't even have a rack for coats in that space. Stated that I watched him intently, expecting him to claim he was trying to trick me by saying this was a joke of some sort, but his face remained serious and continued, "Come look." With a sigh, he stood up and followed me back. I gestured toward the spare bedroom. I said to Tom, "It was exactly there," scratched his head and inquired as to whether I was certain I wasn't dreaming, but I said I insisted with my voice since I saw shivering a little. When I opened my eyes, it was there, up once more, and it was gone. We stood, I said, in the space for a short while, both of us experiencing the same unsettling quietness pressing. At last, Tom let go and trembled, his head concurring that we ought to examine the house in case we looked at everything. Every closet, every room, and every nook. Nothing. No strange coats or indications of forced entrance. Nothing that could be hanging any place. Eventually describe what I observed. Tom attempted to persuade me that I might have been in seeing anything in a half-dream condition, things I wanted to, but couldn't think that I truly didn't want to consider the other option as quickly as the sun had risen completely. I gathered my belongings, bid farewell and drove off. I nearly felt bad for abandoning him after that. The entirety of my journey back to Louisiana, my thoughts kept returning to that particular time. Seeing that coat-like shape when you wake, up from the corner, looking at me the way it was only gone this morning. Perhaps Tom pulled a cruel practical joke on me, but to this he has never acknowledged anything, so I doubt that. Or perhaps there simply was. Someone was observing me in the house. Sleep, and they decided to go before to the morning music. I was 18 when this happened to me. Years of age, I was traveling with my parents and one of my friends, so we can give Anna a call. This tale is set in Sweden throughout our road trip. My Anna and I were going on a trip with our parents. We drove for 8 hours on a domestic journey. The intention was to go to a theme park from home, reserve a campsite and remain there, but we hadn't reserved one, so on the day we reached the city where the theme park is located, was found, but we intended to go there. The following day, thus we required a location to sleep because we took tents with us. My dad looked online for a local vehicle dealership. He discovered a campsite that seemed promising, and nearby, so he dialed the campgrounds. Sadly, the day happened to coincide with the campground and a major soccer competition was completely reserved because we hadn't reserving a place ahead of time. There is still room for us. My dad made several calls, but we were unable to locate any affordable campgrounds close to the theme park. Therefore, we had to look for we configured the GPS at our camping location in the outdoors to the closest forest parking lot to eventually. We managed to avoid parking fines, a location within a natural area where there were some people around when I arrived, so we requested permission to set up our tents there, and whether it was a successful location to stay for a backpacking. Woman informed us that it was a comfortable spot to sleep, and that no parking attendants were present. In light of it, we chose to sleep we were in a little desolate gravel parking lot, encircled by forest and 10 minutes away. At first, the walkway was a beach. Thought about erecting our tents on the beach, but I had a feeling it would be camping in the parking lot is preferable. As we exited the vehicle to prepare our overnight lodging, I observed a lone vehicle parked in the lot farther away. It appeared to be in poor shape, and I discovered it with no one inside. Odd considering that nightfall had already arrived. Consequently, there were no more attendees at the beach or going on a hike in the forest, but I did not give it much thought I assisted my parents. In setting up they were sleeping in one of the tents. Anna and I, however, shared the other with the 2 tents were positioned near each other following. After much effort, we eventually built them. I made our tent comfortable with Anna, watched YouTube while snacking. It was approximately 11 p.m. We desired should go to bed at a respectable hour so that we wouldn't be overly exhausted the next day. We decided to go to bed at midnight. My parents were already at this stage. Anna and I were sleeping in their tent, browsing TikTok when a metallic sound was abruptly heard from the parking. The sound was a lot like a shovel being flung onto the gravel, where we both dove. worry, and questioned one another on what it may be too afraid to look inside the tent window. We decided to be quiet and listen. The same source produced the sound. Direction as the deserted vehicle. I thought I heard a shovel being tossed into the trunk of the vehicle. Then we sat in the trunk as it slammed shut, our hearts thumping in silence. Then we heard the vehicle go as though we were attempting to escape as soon as possible. I texted a companion from a neighboring city, informing him. He responded with a caution about where we were staying. Me that the next beach was renowned for hazardous with organized crime, frequently participating in there. We engaged in illicit operations without thought of this earlier. When I read my message from a friend, I experienced intense coldness, uncomfortable for 10 minutes or so. Quiet after the vehicle drove off. Anna and I had begun to relax somewhat, when we suddenly heard the loudest, most a man's spine-tingling scream approaching from the forests. We were utterly appalled. I texted my mother right away to let her know that When she didn't hear a loud scream, I woke her up by calling her phone. When she eventually responded, she stated neither she nor my father heard anything, convinced me it was most likely nothing significant. However, at that time I couldn't come up with a typical explanation for Anna, and I need someone to yell like that. Crouched on the blankets in fear, not being aware of every minute's events felt like an hour, although we were too afraid to sleep. At midnight, all of a sudden there was an unsettling silence. My blood then became frigid. I heard footsteps. Someone was circling our tents. Anna and I sat up and moved discreetly. Terrified, I set my phone aside so that its illumination wouldn't light up the tent. I could feel my heart pounding. There was no rational way to hear my pulse. Justification for anyone to be out and around our tents at the forest's center at the footsteps traveled about our area this hour. Tent, then in the direction of my parents' tent. They then went around our vehicle, which was parked close by. The individual halted and seems to have been examining our tents There was total silence for a time. Then I heard the same vehicle. Earlier? When it returned, its headlights illuminated our tents, and I hastily lay down with Anna. To stay out of sight, I collected the bravery to look through the tiny tent window. I watched the automobile door smash. Before it took off once more, I had a quick relief as the individual departed. From where I was standing, I could see that they had traveled 5 minutes down the road. Later, I noticed a fast-moving automobile approaching. A police vehicle was racing in the second car had not moved in any direction. Thereafter, Anna and I were involved in still trembling, so we decided to sit to feel safer. Lock your automobile. I remained up, keeping guard until about 5 in the morning. Across the woodland, but Anna finally fell asleep next to me after an hour. We returned to our tent and left. We eventually fell asleep from sheer fatigue. I woke up at around 9 a.m. Exhausted, I told my mother everything that occurred, and she disclosed that she had heard footsteps as well. But when someone was close to their tent, and she had heard someone breathing heavily, like you hear during a terrifying scene in horror films, she had also been afraid throughout the phone call. But my father had been asleep during the entire situation, thus we had to inform him of the tale without hesitation. We instantly filled the tents with our belongings, excited to go as quickly as you can. Not one of us desired to remain there for a longer period of time. Even though it was a terrible night, we had a wonderful experience at the theme park afterwards that day. But that night, I made the decision to investigate the forest in which we had my stomach dropped as I discovered what I had camped. Shortly prior to our arrival, a man had been killed by stabbing there. Because of gang-related, even more unsettlingly, 2 men disappeared from that particular beach and had never been discovered. I was unable to stop. Considering that, what if the individual getting close to our tents was risky? Person examining. To determine whether do you have any witnesses? What if we were in significant risk, without even being aware of it? I still think about the person from that night. Produced that terrible shriek. And what was an individual with a shovel in the center of the police and the nighttime in a forest, I suppose? They were pursuing what exactly? I will never be aware that this tale lingers. Me, when I consider it, although I was quite young at the time, 6 is about the age at which many of my childhood recollections begin to become more. It is evident I have an older sibling. My brother Keith is 2 years older. than me, so he was 8 years old when I was 6, I had a rigid bedtime schedule. 8:30 if our dad or I didn't follow it. None of us stayed up past our bedtime. We would be in a lot of trouble. Our father was... Honestly, they were always harsh with us as children. I can't recall if this occurred on whether it was a school night or not. I awoke in the Keith shook me in the middle of the night. I shared a large bedroom with Keith. My parents' room is upstairs in the house, was located on the house's first story. I didn't understand why Keith was waking me up, until he whispered to me to keep calm and pay attention, and I did. Heard what he was discussing, which was the voice of our mother calling for us. However, it was hushed downstairs. Whispering voice, I was about to get up and go answer our mother's question, but my brother told me not to, saying he didn't. I believe it was Mum. I asked him to stop. Attempting to frighten me, I recall being so angry with him. He instructed me to approach and listen. So I stood up and moved in the direction of the bedroom door directly outside the small hallway that led to the bedroom door led to a second bedroom and the bathroom, which our grandmother would use for sleeping whenever she would sleep just next to the right. As you exited our bedroom, the downstairs stairway with a door as well, I listened to the bedroom door. And I could hear the voice more clearly. Seemed to be our mother's voice phoning our Keith. Mikey is the name I told Keith. That's he, and Mom agreed that it's not in some way as a 6 years old. And as the younger sibling, I discovered that I was the one with confidence. Sufficient to unlock the door of our bedroom and then listen through the door of the stairway, but now the voice ceased. I muttered to Keith. That mother left, and once more he said, "It's not Mom." I insisted that he was frightening me, so please stop talking. So I unlocked the door to the stairwell and gradually opened it to prevent creating noise, and when the door was slightly open, I looked through the bottom opening. Was as clear as day on the steps. Silhouette of an individual. A woman, but correct. I realized right then that it wasn't our mother, whoever she said hello when she spotted me. Come down right away, sweetheart. I closed the door, secured it, and entered again. Our bedroom, and also secured that door. As I began to cry, Keith insisted that I tell you that we both decided to begin yelling as loudly as we possibly could on 3 to awaken our parents, so we began at 3. Yelling and pounding on the ground as despite our loudest efforts, it didn't take long for to storm up the stairs with our parents. First, we pounded on the locked door. Dad was furious because the door was locked. However, once we opened it, they noticed that I had been in tears and we were actually troubled by something. They paid attention to us. My mother was especially worried after informing us the bottom of the stairs was not where she was. Additionally, she wasn't yelling at us. Inquired about the woman's appearance, but all we were unable to tell, although we could say, in the meantime, I recall our father dashing downstairs to, I suppose, search for. After a while, the woman gave our mother a kiss. Good night once more, and I believe she instructed us to secure the doors. I was too young at first to understand, but it appeared as though our parents were well aware of Keith and I might have been the ones. Saw outside the window as soon as we heard the doorbell after some time, and we noticed we wanted to go to the police car outside. Downstairs, but I recalled that we remained there. We pleaded with our parents to identify the person, additionally, but our parents would always claim they were unaware that they would. Moreover, they expressed pride in us for not moving. Personally, I believe they did downstairs. Identify the person and save my brother, and I from experiencing any additional trauma, or they simply didn't tell us out of fear because the last time I had dinner with my parents, I questioned them about it, and they continued to dismiss it as a random intruder. However, that didn't explain how that woman recognized our names. I was 16 when everything occurred, and I didn't have a vehicle yet. Thus, I was dependent on my parents taking me out, or just if it was close, walking was the Haley, a friend of mine, was having some since her parents. One of our pals weren't at home. I was driven there by my mother. Haley's residence was roughly 3 minutes away. My mom drove and walked for 20 minutes. She was unmarried at the time and enjoyed. She informed me that if she's going out, leaving late to simply walk or find a ride, indicating that she was going on a date at home. Haley's was where several of our girlfriends were. Tina, Courtney, Belle, and the 5 of us spent some time hanging around in her backyard. Hours before a few of our school's boys surprisingly arrived. By surprisingly, Haley didn't inform me that I was irritated because I invited them. This was due to the fact that one of the boys a boy who I had some nagging issues with, showed up, passed with and had no desire to observe that Haley believed she was being adorable and cunning by asking him there in spite of my knowledge because she somehow wanted to resolve the issue between us. Was merely a clumsy mess with 4 or 5 girls and boys including me. Thus, ultimately, I simply concluded that I wasn't truly feeling it, so eventually I left. After I left, I'm positive that some of the others soon began to depart. Considering that it was already late, I simply didn't want to spend time with those boys. I made sure to express my anger to Haley. As I was walking, I was distracted by texts, home, and she kept saying, "OMG, please return." I forgave her when she apologized, but I still desired to return home. I strolled for around 5 minutes before I started to slow down. Idea. When I slowed down, I was able to determine that the footfalls I heard behind me weren't. When I turned around, I saw a man in his middle years with a hood over his hands in his hoodie pocket and his head. He looked at me with a smile and said, "How are you?" I said hello and simply. After turning and continuing to walk, we were in the people are strolling around the suburbs. Even though it was 5, it was not unheard of. I continued to walk for a few more minutes, and whenever I looked around, that man, it would still be largely behind me. The same distance or a bit more. Every time I checked, it wasn't I'd have to take a direct route home. Many turns onto roads that intersect to reach my home, and every step I took, he remained there. I was sending a text to my friends regarding it, followed by the man from behind me. Someone exclaimed, "Isn't that a lovely?" I responded, "Night, love, this weather." Yes, and I began to walk after that. A little quicker, but not enough to draw. Feeling like that, I'm fleeing the man spoke once more, and each time he opened, I died a little more because of his mouth. Inside, such as why he was speaking to me. Was he pursuing me? "Are you?" he asked. "From the surrounding area," I responded. "No." I was keeping my response brief and direct, dude. Laughed. I began asking my friends, requesting assistance in sending one of the men to come get me. Interestingly, the boy I was I was en route to pick me up. I'll give him the moniker Brandon, the man behind. Then I said something that made a difference. "I won't hurt him for anything he says. You reside near an elementary school." He stopped as I turned around. His tracks? He continued to smile, but now his grin appeared more phony than dark and menacing. I yelled, "Go away from me!" And I heard the man running and started to run. Caught up to me at that point from behind. My life was at stake, so I began yelling bloody murder. I began yelling, "Help me, everyone!" To awaken in their homes, and the man said, dropping his act of being a kind guy. "Don't listen" to my small shouts. Undoubtedly put him off, since he clearly didn't want a lot of witnesses who were set to emerge from their houses. He fled into the night, and I noticed some lights in the nearby homes. I turned on a couple who emerged from their residence, and I clarified that I nearly received abducted. I remained there, facing their home before Brandon arrived. He took me home after picking me up, and it was only about a minute's trip later. My mom wasn't at home. She wasn't there when she was out. Responding to my text that I didn't want to, I asked Brandon to remain since I was alone. He was happiest the night I knew him. The camper was alive, but it wasn't over yet. We stayed up late, simply conversing and remembering the good old days. When I heard footsteps going around the house. That house had a room that faced the upstairs. We heard the gate to the backyard. The opening in the backyard that my mother would never come in the backyard, so that something was off, and I refrained from screaming at my mother. Instead, Brandon and I simply gazed. Gazing out the window, we didn't hear any more noises we anticipated seeing. Someone is strolling in the yard, but instead, a man's voice spoke to both of us, saying, "When I saw you up there, I heard a gasp and moved away from the window." Something was shouted out by Brandon. Similar to what we're calling the police officers, "You're crazy." That's precisely what we did, given that this dude was aware of my residence. He most likely was aware of who I was. What if he was visiting Haley's home? Brandon accomplished a lot of the phone conversation with 911 reflecting on the past. I am aware that he made an effort to take charge of the situation as the man, and I appreciated that I was genuinely quite joyful. When he entered, the police arrived, and their presence simply gave me a sense of security. Merely providing them with an explanation of I felt better after seeing this man. At least something was done. My mother arrived home shortly after, and she was equally as terrified. They had a police car out while I was parked for a couple of hours on the block as a deterrent. Fortunately, I didn't do any more. I was even afraid to go for a nighttime stroll into our backyard, following which my mother should arrange for our uncle to visit and install. He created a whole security camera system. No attempt to conceal them. They were on with full force to dissuade that eerie man and any additional creeps from arriving at that home. I'm excited to report that the tale concluded there since this incident also. My mum decided to sell that house because of prom. A year or so later, simply because I detested witnessing me live in continual terror. We never learned who lived in that house. The man was